So thank you so much for joining us for our first roundtable of the year. We are rooted. So now we're going to move into the actual audience mapping and segmentation work. And so one thing to remember is if you're truly doing an audience segmentation, then you need to be thinking about it as far as embedding yourself in the community. You need to be able to see it as though it's your child that needs access to the library, or it is your actual neighborhood that is experiencing food insecurity. Whatever it is, the cause that your organization is working towards, it's important that you see yourself in this. Too often we look at this as it's us versus them, and we live across the bridge and we don't have these issues and it's them experiencing it. And so as we humanize the audiences we're working with, it allows us to see the valuable whys. It allows us to see actual people who are experiencing real situations. Segmenting audiences helps your organization design effective and efficient strategies for supporting each audience. A lot of times, as you see, some things we design and we don't consult the people that are going to be utilizing it. And a lot of times it misses the mark, or the message doesn't really land the way it's supposed to. So in doing this and allowing yourself to humanize the audiences that you're serving, and it's allowing you to cater the media, the products, the services based on the specific needs and the preferences of these audiences, tailoring your strategy to the characteristics, needs, and values of important audience segments improves the chances for the desired behavior change. All right, so we have a couple of whys as far as segmenting the audiences, things that, most of us are pretty much aware of. It allows us to humanize and treat members as people and not faceless numbers. It allows us to build relationship and more authentic relationships. It makes it less transactional. It also helps us in tailoring our message. I know a good amount of us are not only in programs, but we have a few fundraising folk on here. And so it's so important as you're segmenting audience, when you're thinking about your donors and your supporters, what you're saying to whom. It allows you not to explain everything, but just meeting people where they are.
The piece we wanted to kind of go into some nitty gritty here around designing your actual segments and thinking about the types of segmentation that you want to do. When we're doing this with clients, we always start with audience categories and subcategories. So, first and foremost, as Sia was talking about, the people that are closest to the work, that are most impacted by the work. And then think about subcategories within those groups. For the next group that we usually will focus on is staff, and thinking about the different people within your staff and organization, because a lot of them, if not most of them, will have some kind of connection, lived experience, some relationship to the work, and their whys are usually very similar to the whys of the people within your community. Then we start to think about organization core values and thinking about what the different people in your community's alignment to your core values as an organization. Oftentimes we'll create our values, we'll have them on our website. There'll be implicit ones, there'll be explicit ones. But what it really comes down to, and the approach that we encourage you all to consider, and hopefully why you're here, is that you really want to center the values and the why, the reason that people are coming to you, as the first and foremost piece in your communications. The next is understanding their lived experience context. Like, that can be across a variety of different things, and we'll share those in just a second. Some to consider are, race and gender and age and disability. There's so many different contexts to consider, their region, their location, what their personal values or needs. Here we have needs, motivations, and barriers, but also thinking about their pain points. And then the last piece is around engagement journey. So thinking about what stage they're at in their understanding of your organization. Are they very familiar with your work? Are they someone who is considering and, hasn't quite like fully come into your community? Or are they a long time champion and advocate of your work? And so really thinking about the different language that you use for different people at different stages in their journey with you. So as I sort of alluded to, some of the factors to consider are the first and foremost that we really encourage everyone to center their work around is the why. Oftentimes people will talk about the how or the what, like, here's what we're doing in the community, here's how we're doing it. And that ends up leading us into lots of places of jargon, and not necessarily like how you would really express why you're doing this work to a fourth or fifth grader, and thinking of it in those terms of how do you simplify what you're trying to express, will really bring people into your work in a more authentic and kind of nurturing for them kind of way. So the next piece here are behaviors and frustrations, thinking about people as individuals, as real human beings in your community, and not just like, oh, we're talking about all of our donors, or we're talking about, all of our community organizations that we're partnering with, but really thinking about an individual at that organization and what are their frustrations? What knowledge do they hold? What are their attitudes? What are some of the practices that they're engaging in? And then back to the engagement journey part is really, thinking about those stages in a more deep and meaningful way. So the beginning with why, as I mentioned, this is how we really center all of our work. And if you haven't seen this Simon Sinek Golden Circle video, we highly, highly recommend watching the first 7 minutes of it. Um, I've just pasted it into the chat. You don't need to watch the whole thing, but it really, he leads you through a discussion as to why. And even though his example around it has to do with why people buy Apple products, for example, it really is meaningful into the work that we do. When we lead with purpose, heart, and feelings, that's how we really will connect with the people in our community. And when we are thinking from their perspective, it's not just about empathy, but as Sia said, really seeing yourself within, then you connect with the work and you connect with people, and you're able to create messaging that just it really inspires people to take action in a different way. So as I mentioned, the sort of next ring outward is the how. How does your work align with the values that you uphold? Again, staying very why and values centered. And then at the last ring is what do you actually do? And again, thinking about that of what you actually do as it aligns with your values, as it aligns with your why, so that your achievable impact is grounded in these more heart inspired things.
As you all are reflecting on your why and the greatness of the organizational work that you're doing, we're going to move back into our groups again. And this time you're going to share your organizational why and, in your opinion, what inspires people to engage with your organization. Then you're also going to share what experiences in their lives led them to be a part of this work.
So Sia and I, well, I'd say a fair amount of our team follows Boulet's work. But this quote in particular felt really applicable to how to think about community-centered audience communications. So I'll just voice over research that does not disaggregate data such as race, ethnicity, disability, etc., may lead to findings that are skewed and possibly even be harmful when published. If you disaggregate, you may find that survey respondents of color, for example, may have opinions completely different than that of white respondents. And this is extremely important if we're talking about equity issues. Our sector is majority white, in certain fields within it, like fundraising, even more white. So disaggregation is vital. If you don't disaggregate, or if you share data that is not disaggregated, you may promote findings that could intentionally or unintentionally be weaponized to further entrench inequitable practices in our sector. I can stick the link to that article into the chat as well, if you haven't read it and are interested. But I think it goes, um, it really speaks to some of the things that we've all kind of been talking about and bringing up. And especially when we spend so much time focused on donors and those in power in our communications, and don't spend as much of our time, if we think about our time as, a pie chart, like how much of your energy is spent on communicating to those within your community, and really understanding their needs, their motivations, sharing their stories in authentic ways that really speak to core values and to our whys. All of these things end up being interrelated, and if we're trying to collectively shift and really disengage ourselves and dismantle white supremacy from our communications, then all of these pieces, we need to hold all of them at the same time, and really think about what we're communicating and how those communications may unintentionally be used to weaponize. So now we're going to get a little bit deeper into everything that we've been talking about, and give each of you some time to think about it and how it applies to each of your organizations, because so often, and what our sort of hope of these times together is giving everyone an opportunity to think about some of the things they don't get a lot of time to reflect on. So the first thing I wanted to put to everyone is to collect your core values, and we'll just maybe spend a minute or two in silence so that you can jot down some quick ideas. But what are the core values of your organization? Do you have explicit values written, or what are the implicit values that people just understand about you to be true? And so here are some examples. We believe work can be done most effectively when we build community. That's something explicitly written down in community-centric fundraising. If you're not aware of that organization, I highly recommend. Boulay is one of the founders. And then implicit, our community includes anyone who wants to work together in equity-centered partnership. It might not be something that is said in, on the values page of your website, but it might be something people just hold to be true. So let's just spend a minute or two and think about what that is for your organization. So the next thing that will take 2 minutes to think about is defining your audience categories and subcategories. I recognize in 2 minutes you're not going to be able to do this thoroughly, but the hope is to just sort of help get your wheels rolling, and we'll give you a tool to use later in the session or towards the end today. So think about your audience categories and subcategories. So category example type would be a school leader. So impacted individuals of an education coalition, let's say. And then the subcategory might be types of elementary school leaders. So principals, teachers, students, family members, guardians, those are all subcategories of people within school leadership. So I'll just take 2 minutes to give you a chance to sketch out some of those. And just for everyone, if you're ever coming to any of our roundtables, we always put the resources in the invite. So if you don't end up getting the email for whatever reason, you'll also have it in the invite. And then after the session, we'll post it onto the website. Okay. And then the last one to think about for a minute or two are the lived experience contexts. Role, race, ethnicity, disability, gender identity. As you can see, there's lots, and there's of course more than what we have here. But consider 3. We'll usually encourage you to pick the 3 that you feel like are most important or most relevant in your context. Okay, so then our final triad share for today is we've put you into some new groups, so you'll get a chance to practice some of the things that we've been discussing. So in your new group, you can spend 5 minutes describing the below, your organization, the why, core values, and audiences, which 3 lived experience contexts you feel are most relevant to understanding everyone's needs and motivations? And then how will you describe your why to each of these groups? So going back to what we were talking about of like home and love and things along those lines, how will you really talk to them about why in this more centered way? And then your partners can have a couple minutes to give some constructive feedback. We want to share our framework tool in case your brain thinks better in a spreadsheet than in the sort of posed questions in the slide deck. So what you'll find in the link that we just shared in the chat is exactly what we've been sort of stepping through together. The identifying your why, how, and what is the first tab in the spreadsheet where it asks you some posed questions. So again, to your point, things you can take back and share with others to onboard them into how to think about segmenting audiences in a different way. And then here it's showing our audience mapping tab, where it goes through all the categories and subcategories. Here it's only showing one column for lived experience context, but in the spreadsheet, you'll see there's actually like 8 or 9, and you can just hide whichever columns you don't want to use. And then some different, you'll see in the spreadsheet, there's a lot of different columns that you can decide if you want to use or what feels applicable to you. So feel free to use it, share it, make a copy, whatever you'd like to do with it. It's yours to play around with.